Welcome back to Matters of Faith. I'm Christiana Bakker and this is Arhan Kardas with me in the studio, a jurist and philosopher. And our rather elevated topic today deals with nothing less than the perfected human being or the universal man. Could you explain to us the so-called alchemical process of ennobling the soul in order to become this perfected human being?
Well, there is a process which was drawn by the Sufis of Islam, which was originated from the Quranic terminology. It is the nafs, which means the self of human being. The self of human being is not identical with himself. The self of human being is something different than human himself.
The tendencies of the soul or the self, the lower tendencies of the soul to do bad things.
Not only that.
Higher
not only that.
and lower, yeah.
There are many different.
Yeah.
There are many different. One of them is those are Quranic terms. It comes in the Surah Al-Yusuf, the chapter of Joseph, peace be upon him. It says, "Inna nafsa la ammaratun bis-su'i," which means the self commands always the worst. That's the worst self. It is conceptualized and became a concept, the worst self. It means an-nafsul ammara, the worst self, the commanding self. This self commands and the man does, which means the self commands you must eat and he eats. The self commands you must have a sexual intercourse, he does. This self says you must steal, he steals. Self says you must talk too much, talks too much. You must sleep too much. He is just like a slave of himself. In that level,
his desires
is full of desires and full of blindness. This nafs, this self, is a blind self. We call them in the literature, in the Quranic literature, nafsul ammara, the worst nafs, the commanding nafs. And the second level of the nafs is the critical nafs, the critical self. It means blaming self. It does something unwanted and unjust, and he blames himself. He says, this self says, well, I haven't had to do that. I haven't had to steal. I haven't had to.
Shouldn't have done that.
I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. He is aware of his weakness.
Yes.
He is aware of his deficiencies, and
he does them, but he blames himself for them afterwards.
He does it, but he blames them. That's a kind of repetition. And the third level of nafs is nafsul mulhima, which means, which also draws from Quran, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. God had inspired the nafs, the right path to doing right and to doing bad. Both of them inspired, and the inspired level is the third level. In that sense, the self can see some divine gifts, some divine messages and images of his realm, and that's the third level. And the fourth level is nafsul mutma'inna, which means the tranquil self. It's a tranquil, it's very peaceful. He thinks everything positively in that or this way, and also a Quranic term, Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutma'inna, in which God appeals to him, come to me, O the soul, which is tranquil. This is also a Quranic term, and at that situation, the nafs is satisfied, and then comes to the fifth level, and that's the satisfied nafs, nafsul radiyya, satisfied in that sense. Everything what God does with him, he is
content.
He's content with everything what God does. He is happy with everything what happens to him. That's a very high degree of nafs. And the sixth level is nafsul mardiyya, which means the satisfying self. Satisfying self is a kind of self whose will is identical with the will of God. If he wishes something, he just wishes because God wishes that.
Yeah.
He doesn't wish something to do because God doesn't want it. And in this situation, it's just like an identical.
And how does he know what God wishes, though, for him?
Well, nobody knows that.
Well.
Nobody knows that. The people who around him can understand, because just like the prophets had this level of nafs, and he wanted something and it occurred. Then you understand that his wish, his will, is coincides with the will of God, and you can understand through the practices. You cannot understand. Nobody can. And a self who is on the utmost level cannot advocate that he is on the top. He became purified. If a nafs, if a self advocates that he is perfect, he's not perfect, because a perfect self does never advocates that it is perfect. It's impossible. You know, that's a paradoxical thinking. But the other people around him can understand, can judge about him. Is on this level, or the Sufi masters. I mean, the guides can understand in which level he is functioning.
Is that the highest level then, when your will coincides with the divine will?
That's one of the. There is one more level.
Which one is that?
That's the purified self. The purified self, nafs zakiyah. That's all the process of purification. At the end, nafs zakiyah or nafsul kamila. It means also the perfect nafs. The perfect nafs doesn't wish and doesn't want, and vice versa. I mean, it's a bit complicated, but he's absolutely satisfied with everything, and he doesn't want anything.
Yes, yes.
Because he is also wanted, and he becomes the will of God himself. He is wanted. He doesn't want.
Thank you so much, Arhan Kardas, for this very enlightening experience, and I'm sure we all learned a lot about how to better ourselves collectively through interfaith dialogue, knowing one each other, and as human beings. To summarize for our viewers, the essence of becoming the perfected human being. You said knowledge was important. First of all, is to seek knowledge, and then also dua, prayers, to pray to God, dhikr, remembrance of God, in order to be able to one day reflect God's names and attributes, and to follow the way of the Prophet, who of course embodied God's qualities. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.